My name is Carmen Ortiz-McGhee. I'm a wife, a mother, a public speaker, an executive, and a change agent. I've spent most of my career creating access and opportunity for underserved communities, largely asset management firms owned by women and people of color. Today, I'm in the business world as the Chief Operating Officer of an organization called the National Association of Investment Companies. We are the trade association for diverse-owned private equity firms and hedge funds. We have about 140 member firms that manage $260 billion in institutional assets. With 50 years under our belt, we are the largest such organization in the country. My story begins as the only daughter of a single Puerto Rican mother who left her family and everything she knew behind to come here to the DC area. As I reflect on those days, I can't imagine the strength and courage it must have taken her to do that, especially at a time when women were really pushed tightly into boxes and female roles. Her example forged in me a dogged determination to overcome any obstacle that stood in my path. Her commitment to ensure that I was really well educated and as safe as possible landed me in private school. It also landed me largely on the peripheries. I wasn't like the children of senators and car dealership moguls that filled the halls of Bishop O'Connell High School. I didn't have the big house or the fancy cars. I dreaded free dress days because I didn't have the latest jeans and cool tennis shoes, and it was terrible. The other thing that no one knew was that I was a survivor of child sexual abuse at the hands of a close family friend. It would last for 5 years, from the ages of 7 to 12. It would cause scars that I would battle to find healing for many years of my life. And that battle would also eventually lead me to finding my biological father after 30 years. But the reality is, when you survive trauma, when you have to figure life out from the periphery, it builds in you a set of skills that you wouldn't otherwise need. A dogged determination to succeed, resilience, grit, tenacity, the ability to assess people very quickly and accurately. And those skills have helped me navigate what has been a journey beset by twists and turns, and still come out on top. When I talk to audiences about resilience and leadership, I talk about deciding that regardless of what your circumstances are, you are going to succeed. Finding advisors inside and outside the organization. You need people who have your back and are not politically motivated. You've got to review your processes. You've got to make sure that whatever has been done before is actually the right thing to do in this circumstance, and fix them and reimagine them as needed. And then you've got to go back and measure regularly. And you have to do this with a commitment to consistency. We hear a lot of people talk about leading with authenticity. We hear this notion of bringing your full self to work. For me, leading with authenticity is a bit different. It's about remembering that the people on your team are human, that they bring stories beyond what you know that impact their day-to-day life. It impacts their execution. It means taking care of yourself so that you can show up and be the example of what's expected from everyone else. It means creating open lines of communication, being able to hear the tough feedback as well as the accolades. Have you ever found yourself in a place where you don't have experience or perspective, but are expected to succeed anyway? That's what Stranger in a New Land is all about. It's about figuring out how to leverage your skills, your values, your abilities to create success regardless of where you are. It's about being seen. It's about building champions and friends. It's about making sure you have a tribe that you can go to outside of the organization that has your back. It's about building genuine, strategic relationships, which is not an oxymoron. It's about committing to excellence and not accepting any excuses that will prevent you from succeeding, again, regardless of where you are. I spend a lot of time in this diversity, equity, and inclusion space with companies and people and asset management firms all trying to figure out what the solutions are to the challenges that face underrepresented communities. But the truth of the matter is that wealth is the thing. Where there is wealth, there is access and opportunity to better education, to better healthcare, to better housing, to better everything. And it's not a zero-sum game. When some people win, it doesn't necessitate that someone else must lose. When we all win, we all win. The story of the not quite enough girl is sometimes the toughest to tell. It's the most personal part of my journey, and it requires that I be the most vulnerable. Because I didn't come in the package that everyone identified with success, it was a story of always being underestimated. Wherever I went, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't pretty enough, I wasn't thin enough, I didn't quite have what it took to make it. And I remember a story of when my middle school principal called my mother in for a meeting. And this was around the time where we were doing all of the entrance exams and the school visits, and she felt it was important to tell my mother that she should consider public school for me because I didn't have quite what it took to succeed in a private school environment at the high school level, in her estimation. Thankfully, my mother summarily ignored her and made sure I made all the visits, that I got to see all of the schools, and that I got to have my pick of where I wanted to go. Of course, I went on to do well and go to the University of Virginia and meet an amazing man who I've been married to now for almost 25 years. We've raised 3 kids. I've achieved success by almost all measures. But I still have that chip on my shoulder from not being quite enough. And so I find myself in rooms often where I feel the need to prove that I belong, that I should be there. And I think so many of us do. I think we all battle with imposter syndrome at one time or another, and maybe more frequently than we would like. But the good news is that there are absolute skill sets and strategies that we can employ to succeed through that, to achieve our goals and our dreams in the face of doubt, whether they be the doubts of others or our own.